Hello there, folks. Well, what do you know? With the spring comes another vinyl tag, a jazz vinyl tag. Just like last year, Chris from Tunes from the Man Cave had put together a tag with 22 questions about jazz. So I thought it was a good idea to film it with my jazz collection right behind me. At least part of it. 22 questions to answer. And believe it or not, this time I managed to put together 22 vinyls to show also. Otherwise, I'm no stranger to actually combine CDs and vinyl, but this time I managed to find only vinyls. Some questions, though, I have to skip because they are in jazz genres way far from my knowledge and interest. Let's start. I'm going to try not to make this video too long. So the first question is favorite jazz vinyl find in 2021, and that was also the same as the favorite vinyl find overall in 2021. This one, the reissue of Dexter Writes Again from 2018. Highly recommended, both the original, but this one is also great because it contains bonus tracks. Favorite reissue release 2021, and as this Dexter Gordon album is from 2018, I haven't bought any newer vinyls, so I have no reissues from 2021 to show. Favorite new jazz release 2021, same there. I had to skip this one because I don't listen to modern jazz of today, so I have no clue what that was released new in 2021. Saxophone led jazz section, that one was way easier. I actually picked two selections that could fit. First of all, Stan Getz as Storyville, with Stan Getz, Jim Rainey, Al Haig, Ted Kotkick and Tiny Can. Live at Storwell Boston. And I could also have picked Super Sax. Here plays Bird with Strings. I mean, how many saxes do you want? We have the elite of the elite here. Trumpet-led jazz section. I picked this quartet led by Howard McGee, underrated trumpet player today in the bop style. Maggie's Back in Town is this, recorded in 1961. Guitar-led jazz section. I picked a great one that I found a couple of years ago, Barney Kessel and Blue Soul. Barney Kessel plays here with several sections, but he is the leader, from what I understand, of all of them. So still it's guitar-led jazz sections. But this is a really great one, containing also Steve Gray on organ. So it's Hammond organ on this one also in some songs. Piano-led jazz section, that is maybe some of the easiest, but I could easily have picked Oscar Peterson. I can easily have picked Lenny Tristano, but I did a little surprise choice. So I choose a French piano player, Jacques Lussier, and Lussier is famous for his jazz arrangement of classical music. Here he plays Johann Sebastian Bach and several organ masterpieces he created for jazz. With his trio. So this is really, really amazing, well made. Organ-led jazz section. That one was, of course, also extremely easy. I mean, I have a lot. You have seen that in previous videos. But, of course, I picked Jimmy Smith back in the Chicken Shack. Blue Note release. Then we have trombone-led jazz section. Not as easy, though I have some trombone, but the problem is that the problem with many of these is that it's supposed to be that instrument leading the section, and I have of course several where two musicians is sharing the leadership. so that was a lot when it comes to trombone. I picked this one, though this is of course not an original. This is a kind of compilation, but it is, from what I understand, the same orchestra on the entire album. Jack Teagarden and his orchestra. It is still Jack trombone player leading a section, even though the section here is pretty big. So 1944. I have gathered pretty big section of Jack Teagarden albums. Jazz funk record. Now we're into genres that normally isn't my kind of music at all, but I have some jazz funk, and I picked this one, Ray Barretto, Eye of the Beholder, from 1977, produced by the Crusaders. It's actually real funky and a great album. And as I said, produced by the Crusaders. How fitting, because it comes to jazz fusion record, and that is a genre that I'm totally lost in. But I picked the closest thing, so I picked a Crusaders. Free as the Wind. I checked up, and they are counted as jazz fusion also. So this had to be my response for jazz fusion, because I have extremely slim collection of jazz fusion. It's definitely not the music I normally listen to. Number 12, underrated record by an artist you love. I haven't read all that much reviews, so it's hard to know what is considered underrated or not. But this one I have read some reviews of that was a little bit so-so. This musical is made to jazz version by several artists. Miles Davis, for instance, is a fantastic one. Another one is made by Oscar Peterson and Joe Pass. And it is released on Norman Graham's Pablo label. And as you can see, Oscar Peterson doesn't play the piano, he plays the clavichord, which led many to shake their head and wonder if Oscar Peterson has gone crazy. It's clavichord and guitar only, Joe Pass guitar. So people thought that this was more of a fun experiment than actually good. Well, it is a fun experiment, and I wouldn't consider it Oscar Peterson's best album, but I still think that this is actually a good album. It is actually a very special and unique album, and very well made. I think actually this is a really, really great album, even though it's not Oscar Peterson's best album and the first album I think of when I hear about Oscar Peterson. But it is actually underrated and still a really good one. Live jazz album, which I feel like I should put out the text a bit about the story about this concept, which I think is very fascinating. I'm talking about this Town Hall Jazz Concert from 1945, released on Atlantic Commodore years. And this town hall concert were created by Danish journalist Tim Rosenkrantz, who was living in USA, and he was living for jazz. He was a huge jazz fan, but he was more into the more traditional classic jazz, swing music, and he wanted to do a town hall concert, a concert at town hall, which also Jumping Symphony Sid, the radio DJ, wanted to do, but he really disliked older jazz, and he was a pure modern jazz fan, bebop fan. So he wanted to do a town hall concert with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, also released on album. And even though they didn't have the same date, Symphony Sid still felt like this was a competition. So he wanted to pull the plug a little bit on Timo Rosenkrantz plans. Timo Rosenkrantz was a little famous for making big plans, but not all the time have the money for it. So he built up big projects and then realized that, hey, I can't afford with this. So Symphony Sid actually put out a rumor, a reputation to the jazz world that they would not, the musicians would not get paid when if they actually were contracted to this. And that meant that many of the agents for the big artists, Earl Garner, Billie Holiday, Mary Lou Williams, they backed off and said, we're not going to be on this concert because we will not get paid. And it also made the ticket selling going downhill. So Timo Rosenkrantz was risking a huge economic crisis due to Jumping Symphony Sid's little schemy plans. And Timo Rosenkrantz then contacted his friend Red Norvo, who then had a nine-piece band, which Teddy Wilson also was a part of. He actually said, of course, we're going to pull through this. We're going to make this concert. And the nine-piece orchestra became the main attraction, the house band for this concert. Contacted Gene Krupa, who also felt for Timo Rosenkrantz and promised to be part of this for free with his trio. They managed to get Don Byas in and Bill Coleman and Stuff Smith, the violinist. And with that, those musicians, they managed to pull this through actually. Of course, there was not that big audience, of course, since Symphony Sid has put a plug on that. But they released this on album. And from what I understand, the selling from this album went to the musicians as a thank you. So Timo Rosenkrantz 1, Symphony Sid 0. Well, not really 0, of course, because his concert was still made and it was released on album also, but he didn't manage to pull the plug on this one. And it is actually a great concert, definitely. It is a very special and unique concert, especially if you know the story behind this one. How they, with very small things to work with, managed to pull through this, even though there were forces that wanted to stop this one. We have also then a supergroup album. What is a supergroup? I mean, all the big jazz musicians have played with each other, and is that a supergroup? But I feel like the main supergroup should be this one. The band that played at Massey Hall in Toronto in 1953. We're talking about Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, Charlie Mingus, Max Roach, live. That is supergroup. Also has a fascinating story because this one was actually played at the same time as a big boxing event was occurred in the street above Massey Hall. So many of the in the audience were on the other side, and it was not as a huge success when it comes to the amount of people visiting this as it sounds like. And this was actually what led to a little bit split between Parker and Gillespie, because Parker took most of the money and the other one had to share the rest. So and Disney didn't like that much, from what I've heard anyway, that it was like that. But it is a fantastic concert, a really, really great concert, maybe one of the best jazz concerts ever. And we have an album with your favorite artist as a sideman, bringing back Oscar Peterson, who many of you know is one of my absolute favorite pianists. Zoot Sims, though, is the main man here, where he and the band plays the Gershwin brothers. But Oscar Peterson here is the piano player, and Joe Pass also is back on guitar. But Zoot Sims is of course the main man. Vocal, no, we have jazz album that more should know about. When if I show Swedish records, of course that is something that I feel like many should know more about in the vinyl community, but of course it's hard for people to know about them. But I picked this one because I feel like this is such a unique jazz style album that I feel that many should know about, and it was played a lot in Swedish radio in the 80s, as it is from 1986. But it is really, really great. Talking about Scandinavian tuba jazz. And we're talking members from both Norway and Denmark here also. And it is a band consisting tubas and a rhythm section. And it actually sounds really, really great and unique and fun, and it's really, really great swing. I really like this album very much. Having some really great samba loco. That one is highly recommended. Scandinavian tuba jazz. Now we have an album by a jazz artist that should have been bigger. And I've always said and say it again that one of the most underrated jazz musicians is Lenny Tristano, who is one of my favorites. One of the first jazz musicians that I discovered when I started to like jazz when I was 12 years old. And that he has been stuck with me ever since. And it takes often famous jazz masterpieces and do them in his own arrangement, so you hardly hear that it's them, and then also in many cases put new titles on them. Interlude is one of the more famous ones. That is A Night in Tunisia, that you barely can't recognize, but it's still, you can hear some phrases of it and realize that this sounds like A Night in Tunisia, but it's really well made. This is the new Tristano, and it's recorded in New York, 1962. He was a little considered ahead of his time in his style, in his cool jazz style, and the invention of cool jazz also often is credited to Miles Davis a lot, but I would say that Lenny Tristano also has a lot of cool jazz spreading around the jazz world also to do. 18, vocal jazz album. I picked Sarah Vaughan and Star Eyes with Marty Manning orchestra and arrangement. Real great one. Hard to believe actually that when I grew up I had hard time listening to Sarah Vaughan, and today I think she is one of my absolute favorites. How things can turn in life. And we have jazz album not many talk about that you love. Depends on what you mean by not many talk about. I feel like when you say Quincy Jones, many say of course that he was a part of Michael Jackson's albums and his great soul and funk albums, which I think is a master of also. I'm a huge Quincy Jones fan. And he did some great jazz funk style also. I feel though that his big band works have been a little bit in the shadows, and especially the part when he was living in Sweden. He was married to a Swede, Ulla Jones, and he was living some in Sweden also. And he was the arranger for the Swedish radio studio orchestra led by Harry Arnold. And when they did this and was going to make a new name for it, they first thought that Quincy's Back Again would be a great name, but Quincy opposed it and said, no, I think it's better with Quincy's Home Again, because he felt Sweden was his home. And this is so amazing, well arranged and made big band jazz. It also contains one of his absolute best jazz tracks, The Midnight Sun Never Sets, with saxophone solo by Swedish saxophone player Arne Domnerus. Close to just an instant classic as Early Autumn, a little in the same style, but it's I don't hear people talking about this when it comes to Quincy Jones' discography, unfortunately. But in my opinion, this might be his best jazz album ever made. 20, a record you hope to find in 2022. It's hard to know. I mean, I pick up whenever I find stuff. This album I've chosen, I have no hopes of finding in 2022. I have hopes, but I don't think I will find it in 2022 because it's very, very expensive from what I've seen on the net, and I've never seen it in a physical store either. But I would like to get a hold of a box set with 11 CDs called the Keynote Jazz Collection 41 to 47. Keynote was a great label that existed only through these years during the Second World War, and it was a label that did a lot of small jazz swing, and with sound equipment that it sounded very intimate, and it sounded like they were playing almost in someone's home, not in the studio. And I really like those recordings and that swing that the Keynote label delivered. So it was really great to find that box set, but I have no real belief of finding it. But I can hope and dream, can't I? New release and reissue that you're looking forward to in 2022. I have no idea what's coming out in 2022, so I have to skip that one. The album that you would save if your house is on fire. Last question. You said it pretty good there, Chris, that if the house was on fire, maybe not the record collection would be the first priority. Now I'm not married and I don't have any kids, then maybe I could focus on record collection. I don't know. But to answer the question, which actually is the same as the most important jazz album in your collection, I picked this one. I mentioned it before. I mentioned it in my channel numerous times, but also I mentioned it in previous question. Lenny Tristano and this last session, the Earl Swoop Sextet 1945 featuring Lenny Tristano. These are recordings made little before he got famous, as famous as he became, it is fantastic. When I was 12, there was a documentary, a portrait of Lenny Tristano in Swedish radio, and that was the program that led me into. I got so caught about music, this formation that I heard on radio, that led me to become a jazz fan, a fan of older jazz for life. So I managed also to find this album with these songs that I heard then, and I would definitely pick this one first if the house was on fire. Not only for the nostalgia, but also it's a fantastic, great album. Definitely, I would consider this the best jazz album I have of many. But definitely this one would be the one that I would save in first hand. So, those were my responses for this 2022 Jazz Vinyl Tag. It's a fun tradition to do, Chris, so I hope that will be one in the future as well. So until next time, I'm going to do this top 25 of 1983 sometime. I promise to do it, I will do it. But until next time, I hope that every one of you have a real nice time in the spring. Take care and so long.